One of my pet projects, those things that I want to do once in a while when I have the time, is to really research and try to understand the concept of decolonization. It's a very fluid concept which, to a large extent, every person just interprets it based on how they feel comfortable with it. And I like to think of decolonization not really in the concept of a power that came and colonized, and now somebody needs to replace the knowledge systems that they left with a knowledge system that they want to replace it with. But I like to think about decolonization as a process of unlearning. Unlearning that which does not speak to your culture, which does not speak to you as an African person or as a person that experienced an interruption of your own civilization. Because to a large extent, decolonization is really much about interruption of civilization than enslavement, as some people would really like to say, because there are some societies that have never really been enslaved, but that they've been colonized because what they believed or their belief system has been interrupted by another form of belief system that now seems to be the default thinking. That is why when you think of colonization, you don't really think about one thing. You're thinking about how was education colonized, how was knowledge colonized, how was vocabulary colonized, how was science colonized. How did you reach a stage whereby when you have to think about what defines architecture to you, it is the Louvre, or it is Arc de Triomphe, or it is the Eiffel Tower, or the Chrysler Building in New York. How did you reach a stage whereby you, as a person not of those countries, cannot find within your own civilization something that defines greatness? If you think about science, you're thinking Louis Pasteur, you're thinking Einstein, you're thinking all these other people when it comes to any space of knowledge without thinking about who amongst your own civilization was great. So to me, that is the colonial project. The fact that you struggle to find heroes from amongst your own people for anything, and you reach a stage whereby you believe what is it that you know now, or what knowledge that you have now was actually brought to you by somebody else from somewhere else. So you end up not having heroes. So when your heroes are people who come from other countries because they brought you a light bulb, Thomas Edison, it now means there's a problem, because you really think the people who didn't bring those things were not smart. The smart people are the ones that you apportion greatness to, like, okay, the greatest person. No, imagine if Edison didn't give us a light bulb, how are we going to light today? Now, when you have to go on a decolonization project, being an African person, for example, you really need to start thinking, what is it that defines architectural greatness to you? How is it that Timbuktu, the mausoleums of Timbuktu, built with sand, built with a kind of clay that even today you cannot find in the West, the kind of structures that you cannot find. How is it that Mapungube, the ruins of Mapungube, when you see the structures that were there, how is it that the pyramids of Giza and those in South Sudan, to you don't mean greatness, they don't mean architectural greatness, that people back in the days were able to build these things that are still standing to this day. And they were built at a time that you are being told, oh, people are still primitive, which to you should say, primitivity did not apply to your ancestors, because they built these great things without all the machineries that you need now, without all the millions that people use now to build great things, what they call great things. Great Wall of China, for example, if you are Chinese, you look at it and think, oh, it was built over a lot of years, hundreds or thousands of years. But it's an architectural miracle. If you decolonize and you're in China, you can't really say, I think the Eiffel Tower defines greatness. For you, it needs to be the Great Wall of China and all other great things that have been built. So I'm thinking decolonization, I'm thinking really that it's a process of unlearning the lies that have been fed into you and really replacing them with the truth that you've been denied, the truth that was there before the lies. So the colonial project of reconstructing your thinking was really more about replacing that which they knew work with something that works, but that is not better than what you had. So when the issue of the colonization of education started in South Africa, with the Rhodes Must Fall and the Fallist movement came through and then things started falling. And then there was the colonized education. I was really worried when I heard people say Africans must fall, because I was like, okay, so why should Africans fall? Because I can't think of everywhere else where Africans come from but in Africa. I don't know of any other country in the world that speaks a language called Afrikaans. This language is so as African as a pyramid. This language is as African as the mausoleums of Timbuktu. I know one will make an argument that Afrikaans is a language that's spoken by that derives from Dutch, and Dutch is people came from Europe and came and later on became Afrikaans, and that doesn't make it as authentic as the pyramids of Giza. But we have always been the people who move around. No one can say where I am now is where I was 3, 4, 6, 8, 900 years ago. We have always been people who move around. And the movement of people was not restricted to saying people from Europe could not move around and come to places like Africa or go to places like Asia or go to places like Latin America. African people have always moved around to those European places, to those Asian places. We have always been people who move around. So the fact that when they moved, those that moved, and I'm not saying come with colonial ambitions, but I'm saying when they moved and they arrived and they decided we're now going to stay and we're now going to create a language that you're going to domicile to that continent, you cannot say this is a foreign language. There's nothing foreign about it. So, but my point is, when they said Africans must fall, I asked, why should Africans fall? I mean, to me, Africans proud, and to me, that's like as authentic as I can think about, as authentic as most of the languages that we have now, because they evolved from somewhere else to become what they are. They were not really as they are right now. So I felt people don't understand the concept of decolonization, because when you say Africans must fall, at Stellenbosch University, what are you replacing it with? Or you want to replace it with English. I think English is more of a colonial language than Afrikaans will ever be, because no one can point to an African that is a colonizer and say this one is a colonizer. Afrikaners, or whoever they are today, when they were called Boer during the Anglo-Boer War, they really suffered very, 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 very painful fate. They were put in internment camp, or what you can call concentration camp. There was a genocide waged against the Afrikaners. And it was a genocide waged by the English against the Afrikaners. So in a way, in an intersectionality way, you find a relationship between the survival of the language and the survival of the people, to the survival of African people and the survival of African languages. But my intention is not to really restrict decolonization to language, but it's to a whole knowledge system, a whole civilization. To say, when you talk about decolonization, we must understand you cannot decolonize in a foreign language. You can only decolonize in your language. And my premise has always been, if you cannot tell me what decolonization is in your mother tongue, you are not ready to decolonize. Ukuthi in decolonization ngesizulu. We all know freedom, inkululeko, kitokologo. That's why you are able to attain it. But now the question is, how do you attain decolonization if you cannot come up with it in your own language? What is decolonization in your own language? But I can tell about, in my own language, decolonization is neti. Neti is decolonization. Because what I have now is not neti, kamaka. So if you say decolonization in your mother tongue, Sipulana, I'll say, get neti. So the unlearning, which is how I define decolonization, is unlearning the lies and learning the truth. And decolonization can need. Mhlawumbe in isiZulu somebody say iqiniso is decolonization, but now it means we need to start decolonizing, and we cannot decolonize when we speak to our kids in English. We cannot decolonize in this language. I'm making this podcast. I'm making this post in this podcast in. We can only decolonize in the mother tongue, because we dream in the mother tongue. And if we are going to implement any change, we have to implement it in the mother tongue, or in a motherless civilization. Like and subscribe to this channel, ASAP, a South African Perspective. Here, you look here, that's where you can go like and subscribe and comment. And let us make the circle bigger.